I've clicked the button. It says we're live. Hello, everybody. Clay, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It's a cold Saturday morning here. We just finished WandaVision. We'll let everyone pop into the stream. We'll talk in the meantime so that people can let us know how our audio levels are. You played Friday the 13th last night. What did I do? I watched WandaVision and then went to bed, I think. We're still in the newborn phase, so my sleep is 4 hours a night, interrupted every every little bit. But I'm here bright and early. Been up since 5. How's your morning going?
Not bad. I've been up since 9:36. So
Cutting it super.
flipped schedules.
You don't want to overthink WandaVision. You just want to go to bed and then wake up. Wes, my audio level is good. What about Clay? Norman? Thank you for telling me, but
It should be. I think it should be okay. I've
sound
got my Apollo. Jeez, it's mirrored, so I keep forgetting. My Apollo 11 film crew shirt in honor of Monica's
WandaVision.
future, and the SpaceX flight that successfully landed and then exploded.
Norman says that Clay's audio is also good. Hello, Cardinal. Hello, Norman. Hello, ALXMVS1. Point extra G. Kyle, it was here, but he might not be here anymore. Good morning, everybody. And we are going to talk about the finale of WandaVision right now. Well, the season's over. Series is over, I think. I don't know. Do you want to start this? Should I start this? I mean, I don't feel like I have much different thoughts from my thoughts that were happening for the second half of the season, really. This was a show that was better early, I think. And as my fears in the early episodes were, I hope it doesn't turn into a MCU fight scene in the finale. And it did. I don't know if you remember this. There's a DS9 episode called The Reckoning where we gave it a 1. And it involved Jake getting possessed by a power wraith, and then him and someone else were standing on the promenade shooting lasers at each other. That's basically, this is a higher production value version of that, I felt like. It's a lot of people throwing fireballs at each other, and I don't think they nailed the grief angle. That's my brief takeaway. What say you?
I'm not surprised that it ended up going the way it did ultimately. I'm a little disappointed that it did, because I think the problem with this show is overall I enjoyed it. I had a good time. It's one of the few shows I can think of in recent memory that I will probably go back and revisit, because I think even honestly, even out of the MCU stuff, there's not a ton of that stuff that I really have an urge to go back and watch again. But this is one that I actually last night threw on the first episode again, and I was like, yeah, it still works on its own, I think. But I think for as ambitious as it kind of was, it was either afraid or it was either afraid or unable to fully escape the MCU thing. Because while I enjoyed the last episode, there was some stuff that I thought worked and a lot of stuff that I thought was just. They just didn't know what they wanted to do, I don't think, in the second half of the show. Because the problem with this setup is that you are kind of establishing Wanda as this antagonistic force, but ultimately she still has to be the hero, but you don't really have her reckoning that much with the stuff that she has done. And she hasn't really changed that much as a character, other than the fact that she's got a shiny new suit, which I thought the suit looked great. But aside from that, it's like you're kind of reconciling very explicitly torturing an entire town full of people with the superhero angle of we must protect this family, and it's just a weird juxtaposition that I didn't think worked.
Yeah. Let us die. People want to die. They want to
die. And like the thing that killed. Okay, so I do want to talk at length. Well, maybe at length. I don't know. Maybe we won't get that much out of it about fucking Monica, because what was she there for? Like it's
just to get kicked into the Captain Marvel movie,
I
right?
guess.
Yeah.
Like, it's weird because they position her as a character in the story that has like a lot of stuff to do, and then she gets sidelined.
Thematically relevant too, which they bring up at the
Thematically
end
relevant.
about, which is another thing about your talk about where it makes sense for her character to be like, if I had your power, I'd bring my mother back. However,
There should be a but in that sentence.
right. However, it seems like everyone you did this to would rather die than have this happen. So maybe it's not. It's a weird. It's the thing you were talking about. Like Wanda can't be a villain, even though what she did was clearly all the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Monica has her ending chat with her, it's just a, gee golly, Wanda. Like I would have done that as well, even though it's a horrific outcome that you did.
Like it's even worse than that because it's not even just I would have done the same thing. She says these people will never understand what you had to give up. It's like, guys, she was torturing this entire town of people for like 2 weeks to the point where they want to die. And Dottie, once she's released, is like freaking out because she thinks her daughter might be dead or stuff. Like you can't.
Yeah.
Okay, so Wanda had a tough day and she had to say goodbye to her fake husband and kids. Like it. I think I think Monica should have had a little bit more empathy for the townspeople in this position. Because I think, you know, I think the angle that's missing in this should have probably come from Monica, which is, yeah, it sucks, but you're not the only person who's ever lost somebody in their life. You know, everybody in this town has lost somebody, and they're all fucking mad at you.
Yeah.
It's very strange to me that she can do this and then just leave, and we're supposed. Okay, here's a question. When she gets her Scarlet Witch powers, right, and then she immediately mind wipes Agatha and banishes her to the suburbs of Westview, are we supposed to feel good about that?
No, that seems torturous.
Yeah.
Based on also just the effect of when her hex wears off and it goes back to the 50s version, and this town is just a burnt out shell of America at this point. Like it's a depressed town. You know, there's a lot of people living in it for some reason, but it's a lot of boarded up shops. Everything is run down. It's a boring hell of fake reality that Wanda seems to get a lot of glee out of putting her into this situation. It's strange. I don't think I wouldn't say that character, well, I don't know if the Agatha deserves punishment, but it seems.
What did she really do?
I don't know. I was going to say I don't know if her motivations were warranting of punishment in the long run, really.
Yeah. I think that's one of the problems of the show is that they were gun shy about making Wanda, and I'm not saying Wanda should have been the villain, right? I don't know if I think the thing is, I don't know if the show necessarily needed a capital V villain.
No.
Because there's a lot of stuff going on thematically that's really interesting that they could have messed with without having to turn into the good guys versus bad guys thing. But since the focus of most of the show is Wanda doing all this stuff, which is seen pretty clearly and pretty quickly as being negative to everybody around her and having a really negative effect, they don't have a villain for the finale. And so they have to kind of scramble and do the Agatha thing, which when you look at what Agatha did across the show, she's not really a villain.
Yeah.
But she's treated like one in the last episode. And also I think that's why Hayward turns into like a cartoonish, cartoon level evil guy. Cause he was just a bureaucrat. And then all of a sudden he's like this super evil guy that's trying to kill her and is like shooting kids and stuff. And it was so desperately trying to find a bad guy to fight.
Yes.
That I think they ended up shooting themselves in the foot.
I would agree. I think that the villains that they added were added just to have bad guys in them, and I don't think either of them worked. Catherine Hahn, I thought, is terrible as Agatha. I think she's excellent as the sitcom characters, and her Agatha really annoys me. It's like a Roald Dahl's witches version of a witch. I don't like it, and I think that she's a little bit corny as that character. I think that the big failure here is the it's as you say, like it starts off with this great idea and concept about how they want to tie things together. I still think the idea was pretty brilliant in a lot of ways. They abandoned it about halfway through, but as I was saying, I think that the show had to do a lot of work to make you care about Wanda and Vision, and
Right.
I think they sort of get there by the end. I think that their end together is okay. I think the final scene where they tuck in the kids and then they say goodbye is all very good. I think that it could have been better if I still had a better sense of these characters. I don't know if the show completely accomplished getting them to be on a par with each other. It did a good enough job. I think it's all undercut by the fact that this is the MCU. He unlocked the memory capabilities of White Vision and sent him off, so he's flew off and he can come back in some sort of future version of himself. He's not really dead. He has a line where it's like, well, shit happens. I could be back tomorrow. I'll see you later. It's very much a Cisco goodbye thing. And it's just the comic book limitation and the brand building limitation, I think, more where the show couldn't break free of the MCU to tell a story that actually made sense with what it was talking about here, because Wanda doesn't really have grief. That's like her grief isn't dealing with her problem isn't dealing with grief. There's now a new version of Vision out there that can be replaced, and her reconciliation at the end of it doesn't make any sense, where she is trying to shut down the Hex and then Vision goes away and the kids start going away, so she stops that. Then she beats up Agatha and then she just shuts down the Hex anyway. And it's like, well, why? Yeah. What's the difference? What did you learn after defeating Agatha that told you it was okay to get rid of your family at that point? I just
exactly.
It didn't say anything. Yeah.
Yeah, that was what was bothering me, is that there's the fact that she so quickly goes from struggling to take the thing down to not taking it down because her family's gonna die, to then, well, I guess it's right, I probably should just shut this down. Like, I didn't get the sense that all of this journey has really changed her at all.
Right.
The Vision thing doesn't really bother me, because I think what they did with him is fun, and it's interesting, and I liked the Vision on Vision battle and the Ship of Theseus thing. I thought that was kind of fun. And if it goes anything like the comic, the version of Vision who's out there has all the memories, but he doesn't have any of the emotion.
Yep.
And also, Wanda doesn't know he's out there because he just disappears, so she doesn't know that that's an option.
Yep. But he must, with his memories, right? He must.
He
doesn't want to close the book on this. Like, he knows of Wanda and everything like that.
He knows of them. I mean, it remains to be seen what he does and doesn't know. I think I don't really have a problem with that stuff. But I think the issue is they never really reconcile the point of the show. I don't think that the branding prevents them from doing that, because, like you said, there's another Vision out there. The lead-in at the end of the show is that she's doing her magic stuff and she hears her kids calling to her, so it tells her that her kids might be out there somewhere. I don't think that stops you from completing your grief story. I just think they didn't really do it. Like, it's a show about trauma, it's a show about grief, it's a show about television, and I don't really think they landed any of them.
Yeah.
I think the stuff it had to say about TV is probably stronger than the other stuff. But even there, like, I was thinking about it today. It's really too bad that they couldn't have done the finale with more TV meta type stuff built into it. Like, why spend all this time doing this television thing just to scrap it? Like, I understand you have to scrap, you're changing the focus and turning it into an MCU show, sure. But, like, you've got this opportunity at the end where the whole Hex is kind of like flying apart and whatever, and you just end up doing a straightforward color laser punch battle. Yeah. And I think they could have done something really visually cool and different, but,
Yeah,
It is what it is, unfortunately.
it's hard to think of what you would do with the TV thing at the end there, but I think there is some sort of, as it's breaking down, I guess you would want to see more of what the hex is hiding underneath, like what the sitcom trappings are covering up, why these people are. I guess it would be a sort of an examination of why it would be hell to live in a sitcom world like that. Like they don't really get into it, and I don't think it's hard to understand why people would be unhappy living in that sort of forced artificiality world. But I think a glimpse of as it's breaking down to see their issues with it might have been a little bit helpful. But they don't do anything as far as I can remember. There's no TV trope in this episode at all.
I mean, even the last one. The title of the episode is previously on WandaVision, and the entire thing is kind of like a flashback, which is it's not as meta as it could be, but it's at least cognizant of what it's doing.
Yeah.
Whereas this one's just a pretty straightforward, whatever. Like it's not. I think there's so much they could have mined in terms of what a series finale is, that and how they're depicted on television and whatnot, that they just didn't do.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, the highlight to me is I do think that its use of moving through the decades to tell stories that were relevant to each episode, at least in terms of like the how those episodes were constructed. Like it's the Modern Family thing is the talking to the camera, so you're allowed to have a little bit of a monologue for the characters that makes sense within the context of how the show works. The artificial trying to escape from reality of the 50s thing, which is like the most heightened version of sitcom, which is the Perfect American Life with the Perfect American Family and stuff like that, the Perfect American sitcom anyway. And I thought it was really clever how the show did all that stuff, and it unleashed the horror, or it showed you little aspects of how horrific some of the when reality would sneak in was very good. I do wish they had kept that, and I think that's the accomplishment of the show if I had to do anything. And I feel that they abandoned that to go back to the MCU thing, and that they kind of are stuck and that they can't escape them. They can't escape continuing these characters, really. There's no good outcome. Where I think my problem with the grief storyline is that for there to be grief, you actually have to reconcile that the person is gone. And I know that she doesn't know about Vision, but as a viewer of the show, I'm like, Vision's out there. He's just white now, and you can go find him. And that it's this continuing thing that we talked about on Discovery too, which is like no one wants to really get into trauma writing. It's like they'll bring it up, but it's like, yeah, I don't really want to think about what that means. I'd rather just everyone says that we'll meet again at some point. So maybe you can interpret that as a religious thing where you're all gonna meet in the afterlife or something.
Yeah.
But in the MCU, he actually exists out there, and because this is a comic book world where no one ever really dies in comics, like so, there's always this chance that someone's going to come back.
Well, to be fair, Marvel has yet to bring anybody back from the dead explicitly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nobody at all. Aunt May? Didn't she die?
No.
And she's not back? Or she died, didn't she?
No.
She's just not back?
No, she's just there. Oh, I'm sorry. In the comics, yes, they do it all the time.
Okay. Are we talking about the MCU?
In the movies, yeah.
Okay.
Anyone who's died in the movies has yet to come back, at least not in the form that they came back in. They were there originally. Yeah.
Like Vision would be the obvious caveat. Not the caveat. He fits that bill where it's a fake version of Vision who came back from being.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't. I think if you're doing a grief storyline, you're always going to be undercut if you have characters who can evade death in some level.
Sure.
And I think that's what this ran into at the end. And I don't know if they were ever going to have. I don't know if I'm thinking too much that it was going to be something profound about it, but I do think it's the archetype thing of Marvel characters or comic characters should represent some kind of like archetype character, and their abilities and things like that, or their personality should somehow tie into this, or like the story that they're telling. And I don't know if these two guys were the characters to do that. That's why the trope of the sitcom was so useful, but I don't know. I was disappointed by the end. And I just have the opposite reaction. It seems like a lot of people, I'll never fit into the people who are like, these first 4 episodes are boring. What the fuck?
Right,
Like, when are we going to
yeah.
get to this? I'm the complete opposite of that. I'm like, these first episodes, in retrospect, I like them even more than I did as I was watching them. But when I get to the end, no more fireballs, please. Like, just stop throwing fireballs at each other.
Yeah, I don't know. It's such a bummer that they ended up doing that, because it's if ever there was an opportunity to not do that, at least not with your main characters, I think this would have been it. Because I mean, if you want to do that stuff, you fine, do it with Vision. You have Vision fighting Vision. That's enough laser blasting and punching and shit that the episode needs. I think they could have done something a lot more interesting with Agatha and Wanda. But, you know.
Yeah, it's weird. There's no
blast lasers at each other.
Yeah, it's just a strange. I don't know what I don't really know what she's after here for that entire thing.
Also, like, I think it's muddled. Yeah, I think the intentions are muddled as well. Because, like, why set up Agatha in that last episode, in that opening scene where she's stealing all of the power from those other witches, apparently by accident, where she says, "I can't control this. I'm not doing this. You're making me do this." And then have in the next one, Wanda say, "The difference between you and I, or you and me, is that you're doing this on purpose and I did this by accident." It's like, that doesn't make you better. And also, why add that to Agatha's character if you're just going to undercut it by saying that whatever she's doing intentionally evil? Like, there should be, I was expecting there to be more empathy there between Agatha and Wanda, or at the very least, Agatha to try and I was expecting Agatha to try to go at, basically, I was expecting Agatha to be like, "You don't know what you're doing. Allow me to teach you what you're doing means. You don't know anything about magic. You're just doing it. You're like a loose cannon over here. Let me teach you." And then Wanda to be like, "No, I don't need your help." And then she's like, "Okay, well then I'm sorry. I have to take these powers from you because you can't just be running around with this shit."
Right.
Like that. But then
she's a cop witch, a witch cop or something.
Witch cop, yeah. But then if you do that, that makes Wanda the bad guy, I guess.
Yep.
And you can't really do that for some reason. Or at least if it's a little bit more gray than what they ended up doing. They tried going black and white, and ultimately it just ended up getting a little bit more muddled. And also, like, why was Hayward trying to kill Wanda?
I don't know. I just, both of them, I just feel both of the villains are unnecessary in this. It's just like, Hayward, all the real world stuff is just terrible to me. I think it's awful. Like, it never got better. It's always kind of hokey. Was it Jimmy Woo? Is that guy's name? What the hell are people talking about? They want a Jimmy Woo show. Yeah, I don't know what Darcy, all those characters just really didn't amount to anything. And there's they made Hayward, I think someone mentioned it, Hayward's trying to make a super weapon. Someone in the chat made a comment. Hayward is trying to obtain a super powerful weapon covertly.
Well, I think Hayward was, as far as I can tell, Hayward's purpose, what he wanted, was to reboot Vision, which he did.
And then he sent her in to stop Wanda from stopping him from doing that?
Guess he could have just left.
Yeah.
He powered up Vision. He could have just fucked off.
Excuse me, he should be focused on maintaining the hex for Wanda to keep her in there and content.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know. I think they just got too caught up with we need a good guy and we need a bad guy, that they kind of dropped their what was making it interesting and any of the novelty of it. You know, so one of the things that I do find interesting about it is, you know, you've got Jimmy Woo and you've got Darcy. They were ultimately kind of pointless characters, but I think their pointlessness is amplified because they are characters that we've seen before and actors that we know. Like if this was just if this was another show and they chose to have an FBI guy and a astrophysicist character, I don't think it would stand out that much that they didn't really have a lot to do, because you wouldn't be like, oh, well, these guys are part of the show. They're part of the focus of the show. I think you get that because they're characters people recognize and actors people know.
Would do you think the
no
show
no excuse for what they did with Monica?
Yeah. Do you I think interestingly, I come back to, I think my main takeaway from this is that it comes back to something I said in the first episode, which is that I wish this was an independent IP idea, because the fact that Wanda and Vision were in it from the start, at the point when I was watching the first episode, I go, well, I know something's up. I know,
sure,
if this was just like Tom and Jane, two made up characters who had this sitcom existence and then sort of weird reality kept poking in, I'm like, what a great idea for a show. Ultimately, I think what undid this one is its dependence on brand building, and they are just stuck with these characters that you can't really get rid of them, because you have to have Vision available for potential future work. You have to have Wanda out there because she's in Doctor Strange.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
I don't think that this was a good example of the fact that those characters having to continue undercuts what the plot of the story is. I think if you're going to construct stories in this way, it can't be stories that have to deal with loss and then get undone. So while I really appreciate them trying to do it here, I think if you're doing a brand building exercise like Marvel is doing, I think you have to be very specifically choosy about what kind of stories make sense that can't deal with characters not being around anymore, because you have to undercut it at some point to get around that. And I don't know. That's just it. I really would have loved to have seen this as a 5 or 6 episode independent IP idea, to see what that actually would have come up with, because I think in that case, they would have no need for Agatha, no need for Hayward, and they could entirely focus on someone hiding trauma in this fake world that they've made for themselves.
I don't necessarily think that the brand building aspect undercuts it that much, because they still can tell stories about characters that have an end if that's the end of their story. And I totally get what you're saying, and I agree with, it's really difficult to do a story about grief and loss when the characters ultimately don't really lose anything. But I don't think that the fact that Wanda has to show up in something else, or the fact that Vision is going to show up in something else, necessarily means that they can't tell the story that they wanted to tell. Because I still think you can tell that story. Like I was saying, I think the
grief storyline.
Yeah, I think you can, because Wanda's trauma is cumulative, right?
Yeah.
It's not just losing Vision. It's losing her brother. It's losing her parents. It's being tortured by Hydra. It's all of that stuff. I think you could still tell that story perfectly fine and have the characters continue, because their stories aren't over. If their stories are over, then yeah, you should end the character's story.
Yeah, I think it doesn't. I would say it doesn't work because it's WandaVision is the title of the show. It's not Wanda and her family. Like the cumulative effect, I agree, is there. It's not focused on enough because they have to focus on Vision, and Vision is the one character who can come back. Arguably, I guess anybody could come back, but he's the focal point of it. And if you are,
and part of his thing, though, I mean, his journey through the series was trying to figure out what the hell he is. Yep. That's the last thing he says before he disappears. He's like, "What am I?"
Yep. And
now he's transmuted into another form. So I still think both of those things are equally valid. I just think it's the way that they told it. That's the issue.
Yeah.
I do think there are brand trappings that hamstrung it, but I think it's less about characters returning and more that there needs to be like this hard line of good guys and bad guys. Because I like the concept of Agatha. Like I think in retrospect she wasn't doing as much as they claim that she was doing. Like if she was there and you go back and you realize that she's kind of like nudging things in a certain direction and trying to instruct Wanda. I think that's the problem. Is I want Agatha, her want is unclear until the last episode, and even there, it's like, I think that character is really fun and could have been really interesting as this sort of like gray area Obi-Wan type character. And she is to an extent, but they have to send her into the bad guy realm, so they kind of lose anything interesting they're doing there. And Hayward is just, I don't understand that stuff.
Also, I think they undersell the Scarlet Witch factor for judging from someone who's coming into this unfamiliar with the comics or anything. And I know that they're changing it here into more of a mythological witch folklore figure where like the witches all know that this person is coming.
Sure.
Agatha being so interested in the Scarlet Witch kind of demands that you explain what the Scarlet Witch is
earlier.
A little bit more than what this is.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's too. I had my reaction to the finale was very similar to a lot of Discovery storylines where my brain, as people are starting to tell stuff, I'm like, I'm just watching it. I'm realizing this is not going to sink in, or this is not going to have any impact on me. So I'm just like, okay, yeah, all right, you're going to fly around. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. It really struck me as very similar to Discovery and where it moved into eventually, which is too bad because it started much better than Discovery has ever started and had more potential, and it was better produced all around than Discovery generally is. But yeah, it's it devolved into a plot thing as opposed to a story later on. The further along it moved, it became more about plot and less about story.
Yeah. Honestly, in retrospect, the last 2 episodes feel like a different show.
Yeah.
Because if you were to watch the last 2 episodes and you get to the end of episode 8 and you zoom in on Agatha going, that means that this is chaos magic. You're the Scarlet Witch. If I hadn't watched the previous 7 episodes, my immediate thought would be, oh, this is a concept they've been at least introduced in some form previously in the previous 7 episodes and is somehow crucial to the journey of these characters and not just something she says at the end of an episode that has the character's name in it.
Yeah. It's like Jason said in the, he said it earlier, I missed the comment, but it started off as a story about grief and it turned into an origin story for the Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, because that's what the other thing that was really bothering me is they've got this whole big triumphant thing where she turns into the Scarlet Witch as though this is like what she'd been driving towards all along, and she has now finally attained her true form.
She says, "I know what I am," something like that, and then just turns into like nuclear form.
Right.
Phoenix
and I'm watching
everybody.
that going like, sure, this is cool, but that's not what the show is about.
Yeah.
This is not a show about Wanda trying to having like a crisis of personality and not knowing, well, I guess technically it is, but it's not in the way that they're presenting.
Right.
Like her
not as
leveling
victorious,
up.
I guess. Yeah, Goku level up powers and becoming like, this is my final form. It's the opposite emotional spectrum from realization of what she's done to everybody.
Like if she had done that and it happened like accidentally, it would probably make more sense. Mm-hmm. But to have, I don't know, it's just a weird thing to throw in at the end to get to your Scarlet Witch costume. Like, it doesn't come with any character change, or it's not like the stuff that she has learned and worked through is now represented by her attaining this new form of someone who is metaphorically changed as much as physically changed.
Right. It's not like a caterpillar into a butterfly. It's like it's not related to what is the Scarlet Witch's powers? It's the power of creation. Is that what Agatha says? She can
in the comics, I've actually been reading the old Vision and Scarlet Witch comics. I never really knew what Scarlet Witch's powers were in the comics. Apparently, her power is probability manipulation.
Yeah. I think Agatha says that. You made a probability hex.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Which, like, man, I love how weird some of these powers. Like, they made so many superheroes as they were making these comics that they came up with the weirdest, like, abstract concepts for powers.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I can alter the probability and make sure that maybe this door has a better chance of opening. She'd be killer at D&D.
Yeah. God damn it, Wanda! You rolled again. It is a strange power, just related to her name as well. It's just, as you say, it's just manipulating luck. Like, she's lucky. She can become lucky or make other people unlucky.
It's more it's like more specific, but also more abstract than that, because they do have characters whose things are they have crazy luck. Like Domino from Deadpool, she's very lucky. That's what her power is. Scarlet Witch can manipulate probability, which somehow turns into her being able to, like, being god level powerful.
Thank you, Cardinal.
I mean, maybe it's one of those things where it's like Magneto on the surface is like, oh, he can move metal stuff. That's cool. But when you extrapolate that out, you're like, oh, he can stop your heart because he controls the iron in your blood. That's pretty intense.
Yeah. Thank you, Cardinal, for the super chat. Happy to do the streams. Wanda can change the physics of the universe like a proto-molecule. Wanda can do everything. Sure. There's nothing Wanda can't do. The costume. You like the costume. This will probably be final thoughts, and then I'll have to run. But I thought the costume was borderline. It was right on the fence, but on the side of being okay. I thought, like, it got dangerously close. I was glad they didn't just stick with the energy helmet thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I felt like the energy helmet is a better representation of the aesthetics of how the Marvel characters look. You know, it's you have to kind of go a little bit more realistic, like when Captain America went from bright sky blue to a more realistic blue that someone would wear, like a darker color.
Right.
Wanda's kind of the same. I didn't mind the costume, but it could have been worse, I guess. So I'm happy with it. You seem to like it a little bit more.
Yeah, I thought it's a good design. I thought it's I think it looks I think it's as good a live action representation of her comics costume as you're going to get. And
yes.
I don't mind it being a little bit more on the costumey side, because she's supposed to be this, like, god level character. They get to wear whatever they want.
Yeah. Andrew, you are late. Not accusing you, but you're late. We talked about Hayward. We didn't like Hayward. That's the quick answer. We'll wrap it up there. I don't know if anyone has any comments about it. People seem to generally fall in line with what we thought. Maybe some people liked it more. I'm getting a couple people tell me I'm looking for too much out of this, or expecting too much out of these shows, which I disagree with. Not in terms of the movies. I think if I were talking about the movies this way, I think people would be right to be like, this is not the point of these movies. There's no emotion to these movies, really. It's like the most broad version of introspective being about something. Like Thanos' plot doesn't make any sense. Like, no one really cares about this. It's the action of the moments, and the emotion you get from it is the epic scale of it. When something goes well, you're like, yay, I'm happy for these characters. When something goes bad, you go, boo, I'm sad. TV is different. And when you tell a small story over 9 episodes, it kind of has to be about something for me to be interested in it, because otherwise it just turns into this finale here, which is a lower budget version of the movies. And I don't need that. That's not what I'll go watch the movies if I wanted to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing that's funny about the way Marvel handles their movies, and so far their TV show, is it is very much in line with comic books. Like, the way that they handle their stories and how they interlock and everything is very in line with what they do in the comics. And this felt in line with a 12 episode or 12 issue miniseries. Comic book miniseries. I do agree with you that there is more need for the stories to kind of be about something on TV. I'm not really sure. I don't know if it's because it keeps part of what TV is asking from you is to keep coming back. And so, like, you go to see Iron Man, you have a good time watching him do his thing for 2 hours, and then it's like, yeah, it was pretty good. But it's like, okay, but we want you to keep coming back every week to watch him do that. It's like, well, I think it's
just
this,
smaller. TV has to be smaller and more
Yeah.
personal because it can't do the movie spectacle all the time, just because of realities of production. And if Iron Man was however long this season of WandaVision was, you'd be like, this movie is too long. There's not enough material here to carry this stuff.
I think that's the other thing, which they kind of weirdly backed into in this show, is episodic television works because they are small, self-contained stories, and you kind of get just a smaller dose of that movie feeling where it's like, okay, well, this was fun for half an hour. On to the next one, see what the next one is. But if it's the same thing, if part of the thing is like, no, this is one long story, then yeah, you got to be bringing something to the table other than just punch fights or whatever.
Right.
You know, like that was one of my big problems with The Walking Dead, is that The Walking Dead is this like long continuous story, and I didn't give a shit about anything that was happening. Everybody's like crying and getting eaten and stuff, and it's like, in service of what? I think it's interesting watching this because it seems like Marvel is trying to adjust for television and they haven't quite nailed the mix yet.
No, this is a good attempt too.
I
Don't
think
get me
so,
wrong.
too.
This is fine. As Alan Sepinwall ended his review, like, please keep trying stuff. Like, I don't think this ended well, but please continue to experiment with what you're doing. And I would agree with that. That would be my final. It's like it was not a horrible season. It started with great ideas, and as you say, it's just they just have to fine tune what separates the MCU movie universe from its TV shows. And the Netflix Marvel shows, I think, actually did a better job. I think that those just suffered from bloat, and they didn't have nearly as interesting a concept as WandaVision did. And that's about it.
Yeah.
I'll just a couple quick ones here.
Sure.
Would you rather see a Doctor Doom series or a Doctor Doom movie? I'm equally disinterested in either of those things. I guess I would rather a movie because it's only an hour and a half or 2 hours as opposed to a series.
I would like to see Doctor Doom as the villain in a Fantastic Four thing. I don't think I need 9 episodes of what Doom does on a day-to-day basis.
Irons his socks.
I do want to say one other thing about this.
Sure.
I think that this show, I think it was a good opening salvo of Marvel being like, we're coming for TV. Because it's about TV, it's about the history of TV, it's literally about Marvel, the Marvel universe living in the TV world. However, I wonder if in retrospect it wasn't the best thing to start with, only because starting with something so abstract and different and kind of a stay with me here kind of approach lent itself, I think, too much to people going off the deep end about theorizing stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I guarantee you people don't react this way to Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Oh, really?
I don't think so. It seems to be like it's going to be a more straightforward show.
Yes, but I guess I would see. Well, I guess it depends on what you. Because I think the speculation to me stems from the fact that it's in the MCU. So people are like, "How does this feed out?" Will be the thing. So I think that anything that happens in Falcon and Winter Soldier, people will be like, "Well, this is how they're going to introduce Rhino or something." You know, it's like that.
Well, I think a lot of that speculation comes from the fact that this was something dealing with reality and shifting reality and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it was more of a mystery than probably, the Winter Soldier, I assume, would be.
Yeah, more of a mystery, and just the powers that were clearly on display were bigger. I mean, when you've got the Scarlet Witch involved, and one of her most famous stories is the fact that she got rid of all the mutants, you instantly have people thinking, oh, is this how they're going to bring the X-Men in? And, you know, I was listening to a Vanity Fair podcast about this last night, and that one of the hosts was talking about Evan Peters being like, I guess he wasn't supposed to be Quicksilver, and I don't know. I feel kind of let down by that, but I guess that's what they did. But I mean, there's still a chance, maybe. And I was like, come on, God, let it go, man. It was I've seen a couple things
Frank
talking.
Boner.
Yeah, Ralph Boner. Well, he's
Boner.
Agnes's. It's actually kind of funny in retrospect. I was watching the first episode when she talks about her husband Ralph and how much of like a lazy layabout he is. That's what he is at the end of this episode.
Yeah.
But like I've seen people talk about how Bettany and Olsen were lying to people because Olsen said the thing about the Luke Skywalker level cameo, and Bettany said the thing about an actor he's always wanted to work with. The thing about him saying that about himself is hilarious.
Yeah,
I think that's
very good job.
Very good job. And Olsen was clearly talking about Evan Peters. And like that's a big deal. That was a big deal. And people weren't satisfied by that. And it's really fascinating to me. Like I think there's a level of theorizing and extrapolating out that is just insane. That goes because it's not like
it's actively harmful to your enjoyment of the show.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
Because it's they do it on a level that is like inconsistent with how stories are told, which blows my mind too. Because it's like Marvel knows how to tell a story. They very rarely just throw crap in there for the sake of throwing crap in there. And if they do, it's not like story breaking stuff.
Yeah.
So like getting into the 8th and 9th episode of this thinking like, well, I think Mephisto's going to show up. It's like, he's not going to show. That's not what the show's about. That's not what the story is. That's not how this stuff works. And it always fascinates me how people just like the theorizing is built out of just theory. It's not built out of analysis of the show.
I think it's built. I would augment it. I think it's built out of people who are extremely familiar with the source material want to see. I knew that was going to happen.
Sure,
like I predicted. Like I'm very well versed in all this stuff. And why didn't they do it? That's the only way they could have done it. I think it's just a bad look because it's distracting from the show. I think all the theorizing about WandaVision distracted from what the early point of the show was. And when you get to the end of it and none of it happens, you start looking back through like old threads and you're like, maybe that should have happened. You know, like there's no good outcome to it. You're just accept it for what it is. I do have to run though. So
sure. Two real quick things I want to notice. The movie marquee that kept flipping through. One of the things was Oz the Great and Powerful, which is directed by Sam Raimi, who is directing the next Doctor Strange movie.
That was fun.
And the other one was the Tannhauser Gate, which is a very specific reference to Blade Runner. That phrase doesn't show up anywhere else, which was fun. But
what is it? You've never seen lasers
it's part
off
of
the Tannhauser Gates or whatever?
Roy Batty's monologue at the end there. Yeah. But yeah, overall, I liked it. I thought it was good. I think it's a good opening shot, and I hope they keep pushing the boundaries.
Agreed. Thanks everybody for coming out and watching. Thank you for the super chats. Did I thank the second super chat? Progman 3K. Thank you very much. You were the second one. Thank you for your generosity. And Cardinal. Thank you very much. I think it was Cardinal. Apologies if I missed it. I'm not good at this live streaming thing, but thank you all for.
We need a moderator, man. To start
I know.
calling that stuff up for us.
Someone just chimes in. We'll be back quickly. The upcoming things are Monday nights Eastern time. We'll do our season 2 wrap up for Enterprise, and then the Zindi starts on Thursday for the podcast. Patreon continues. Patreon.com/Lipinski File. You get all the extra stuff. The horror. There's Ultimate Computer. We're revisiting Friday the 13th 3D, and then the hell's the other thing?
Iron Man.
The first Iron Man movie. So we're starting at the MCU right at the beginning, and now you can. I'll tell you how let down I am by it. And that's it, I think. Otherwise, Ron Horror continues. Badass will be back in the future. And that's it. Guys, thank you very much for listening. We will see you later.